details. So let's jump into that. Okay, great. So let's start working on our toon shaders. Before we do that though, we have a little bit of setup to do with our scene here. So let's first of all create a plane, Shift A, mesh and plane for the ground that we're going to stick our mushroom on. And let's scale it up absolutely loads. Then we're going to select everything in our scene, that's our mushroom, stem, cap and plane, and press Ctrl A and apply all the transforms to that, which is just going to make sure that our scale is correct. Now, this may affect your modifiers on your stem, so if it does, just simply go back to your textures here, go down to your contrast, and just increase again until you're happy. I'm going to say this time about 0.04, seems good to me. Awesome. Now, let's take a look at what our camera is looking at. So we're going to press numpad 0 to go inside our camera view. Then we're going to go to the view panel here and lock the camera to the view, this, and then when we scroll and move around, our camera will follow that. So I'm just going to point it directly at my mushroom. That side looks like a good side to me. Fantastic. Let's press 0 to get out of there again. Let's just select our light and go down to our light properties here, and we want to turn off, believe it or not, shadows for our point light. Okay, great. Let's now go over to our shading menu, like so. Let's just stay in material mode for the viewport shading, and we're going to add a new material to our object. So let's, with our mushroom stem selected, say, let's press plus new, and we're going to rename this material mushroom stem. Now, the toon shader that we use is very, very simple. All we need to do is add 2 nodes. We're going to press Shift A in this panel and choose shader to RGB and pop one of them in there. And then Shift A again, and we're going to choose color ramp. Okay. Now just disconnect your BSDF from your surface by grabbing this green noodle and just getting rid of it. That's going to make your mushroom black, but don't worry, that's fine. And then position your nodes so that your principal BSDF output goes into the shader's input. The shader's color output goes into the color ramp's factor input, and the color ramp's color output goes into the surfaces of the material output's input. It can look like we've not changed anything, but that's because at the moment what it's doing is it's taking any dark areas on our object and applying the color black, and any light areas on our object and applying the color white. If we were to change this from linear to constant and then slide this white slider back, you'll start to see where we're going with this, okay? So all we need to do is apply the colors that we'd like on our mushroom stem to the color ramp here. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab my colors that I got from my previous tests. So I have a number of purples and things like that here that I like. And I'm just going to copy and paste those into our color ramp by selecting the slider that I want, clicking this box, going to hex and pasting them in. Now, of course, you can obviously choose your own colors, or you can just copy the codes that I have here on my screen. It's completely up to you. But I'm just going to pop these 4 into the stem. And I think 4 shades is probably about right. And once you do that, you'll start to see where we're going with this whole idea. Boom. There we go. We now have 4 shades of purple, and the distance between these sliders is actually important because it affects the distance between your materials, where it switches between the materials' colors. So if I move these up, then you'll start to notice that the other shades start to creep in a little bit. Before you get too much of an accurate idea though, you do need to make sure that now you can switch to a rendered view, which then will apply your light to this object. Just for simplicity, I'm going to hide these other points here for now, so that we can see how it's affecting our stem by itself. And if I do move this light around, you'll notice that the light changes on our object too, which is beautiful. Okay, so let's select our object again. And now if we start playing with all these, you'll start to see how our objects creep up in how much light they absorb. And I think that's probably looking about good for me. Perfect. Let's turn back on my mushroom cap, and then I'm going to go to the mushroom cap, and we're going to apply the same material to it, like so. That's looking pretty good. However, we're then going to click this little duplicate button, which is new material based on existing, and we're going to call this one mushroom cap. Okay. Then I'm going to take the pink colors and apply that to that. So obviously, I'll just fast forward through this bit for you because I'm literally just copying and pasting colors. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Finally, let's do the same thing again for the ground. Let's turn the plane on. We'll select our plane. We'll select mushroom cap. We'll press this duplicate button, and we'll call this, I don't know, cave floor. And I have some nice dark browns that I'm going to apply to this same shader here. And again, I'll just fast forward through that. Okay, that's looking pretty good, but let's go ahead and add the same modifier to the floor as we did to the mushrooms. So we're going to go to the displace modifier. Okay, we're going to create a new texture. We'll call this one cave floor bump. And we'll do the same thing. We'll go down to this tab here and choose Voronoi, and we'll bring down the contrast of that Voronoi a little bit and bring up the size as well. Now, obviously at the moment we're not seeing much because we need to tab inside our plane and subdivide it. So we're going to press Ctrl R and scroll up a bunch of times until we get a load of surfaces. Right click to release, do the same thing again. Scroll up, we get a bunch of surfaces, right click to release. Like that. Then when we go back, we're going to start seeing some of those bumps in there, which is lovely. So let's go and increase that contrast a touch and put the scale back to where it was before. Okay, that's pretty good. Now, of course, if you wanted to as well, you could tab into your edit mode here, select a point, press O and then G to do your proportional editing mode, and then just pull around a few of these points to create a little bit of natural variation in your cave floor. Like so, just to add a bit more to that. Okay, that's looking pretty good now. The only other thing to do now is to add some borders to these mushrooms with a Emission shader, so we get a nice thick chunky border and everything. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select, say, my mushroom cap, for example, and we're going to go to our materials panel here. We're then going to add a second slot for a material. We're going to get a new material, and we're just going to call this mushroom border. Okay, now we don't want a principled BSDF for this, so we're just going to delete that. We're instead going to press Shift A and add in a emission node, and then we're going to connect the emission node's output to the surface input of the material. And we're going to take the color from this. We're just going to take the darkest purple that we used on, say, the mushroom stem, paste that in there, and then we'll just darken it up a little bit more. So we've got a not quite black, essentially, a very, very dark purple. Okay. Awesome, hasn't done anything, right? That's because we want to apply this to a Solidify modifier on the outside of our mushroom cap. So go to our modify panel here, click add modifier, and we're going to choose Solidify. Then we're going to go down to our materials section of the Solidify, and we're going to offset the material by 1, which basically takes the second material slot from the materials that we've applied to it. Okay. Now, to get this to actually show up, we need to increase the thickness on our object, okay? But at the moment, you'll notice it's not really doing what we want. That's because we need to go down to normals and click flip, and that's going to apply the to the outside, essentially. Then back in our materials panel here, we need to go to our settings and choose backface culling, and that's going to apply it basically to, it's going to take your actual object and subtract that from the color